This is the Absolute Business Mindset podcast, created and hosted by Mark Hayward. This podcast will interview entrepreneurs, business owners, and people in their careers. We will delve into their journey to success, key life milestones, and go deep into their area of expertise. This podcast will inspire and educate with great guests. Today we have Jeff Haden, who is a speaker, a ghostwriter, and a contributor, editor for Inc. magazine. Hello, Jeff. How are you?
Mark, how are you?
I'm very well, very well. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, it is my pleasure.
As I said before, Motivational Myth was one of the books that a couple of years ago that really made a big impact on me. So thank you so much for joining. So we're going to go all the way back to your degree. But I'm going to take a step. We start at your degree, which I know is communication arts at James Madison University. But just give me a little bit of background about your upbringing and sort of how you got to do your degree.
Let's see. I grew up outside of Richmond, Virginia. I'm the first person in my immediate and somewhat extended family to have gone to college. But I never had, how do I say this? Like, I never thought that I wouldn't, because my parents all along assumed that I would go to college, and that was the plan, and that was the point, and I was going to somehow live a better life than they did. Not that they thought theirs was horrible, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I never didn't think about going to college. And in fact, my dad, he worked for the telephone company, but he also would build houses on the side and stuff, and I would help him. And he would sit there and wait until, like, say if we were digging footers for a foundation and we would do it by hand because we didn't have enough money for equipment, he would wait until I would like groan or moan or sigh or something. He would say, "That's why you want to go to college, son." and I would try so hard not to make those noises because I knew it was coming, but it would happen. So the problem is I knew I was going to college, but I didn't have anything that I knew I wanted to do.
Right. So
communication arts for me was kind of the degree for someone who didn't know what degree he wanted to have.
So what is communication arts? Because it's very...
Originally, there were three different parts of the department. There was like speech communications, which you can tell by my hillbilly accent, I didn't learn anything from. There was like written and things like that. And there was radio, TV, film. And so I thought at the time, wow, it'd be cool to be a disc jockey. You know, I could see myself saying, "Coming at ya this morning." But that didn't work out. So it just became like my degree is basically, I've got a little bit of speaking, a little bit of writing, a little bit of business communication. It was a very fluffy degree is probably the best way to put that. And it made me spectacularly unsuited to do anything actual when I graduate, other than show people, hey, I have a piece of paper. Right. Which leads me to probably where you were going to go. Why did I end up working in manufacturing?
Yeah, well, this is the thing. You supplemented your degree by becoming a forklift driver and working in a plant, in a factory.
Yeah, so, my parents had enough money to pay for my tuition, and I didn't want to live at home and go to college. And so I knew that I would have to work. And so I got lucky. Instead of getting like a part-time job at a fast food place or something like that, there was a manufacturing plant in that town that wanted somebody that would work 40 hours a week, but could do it on whatever schedule they chose. It was just, there was a block of work that needed to be done. It was not dependent on anyone else. So as long as you got your work done, it was okay. And so I took that. And so I had a full-time job with benefits even while I was going to college, which meant, my college experience was basically going to class and coming home and going to work. But that was okay. But in the course of that, I found out that I really liked manufacturing. I liked making things. I liked the process part of it. I liked all of that, even though my beginnings were incredibly humble, because when I got out of college, I went to another company. It was a Fortune 500 company. It was the largest commercial printers in the world at the time, who had just built a plant. And I started at the very bottom. They called us material handlers because what we did is we handled materials by hand. So basically you moved heavy things around all day. Right, okay. But I knew there was opportunity. And one of the products of the way I was brought up was, my dad's thing was, well, you may not be as smart or as connected or as wealthy or all of those other things as anybody else, but you could always work harder. That is the one thing that you control. And so I thought, okay, if I have to start at the bottom, that's okay. And actually it was a little bit of an advantage because I was the college boy I was the only person in like a department of about 300 people who had a college degree that was working on the shop floor. So they automatically assumed that I was going to be terrible. And so I actually kind of won because the expectations were so low. It was almost like, oh my gosh, he can actually work, and I benefited from some other things too. So, but I was willing to take a chance on myself and say, okay, I'll start at the bottom and I will show you that I can do more than that.
And you spent 17 years, didn't you?
Yes.
Like 19 years in the whole industry.
Yep.
What is it that you liked about manufacturing? Is it the creating and sort of making something tangible? Is there something pure about being able to do that?
That is certainly a part of it. But what I really liked as time went on was the ability to take what were pretty set and rigid processes and then look at them and say, okay, that is the way we have always done this, but there's another way we could try to do this. And then I really enjoyed doing that through other people. And that became, if I had an advantage as a leader as time went on, because I worked my way up through the ranks and I eventually ran a plant. That was my goal. Right. And we can talk about what happens at that point later. But that was my advantage, was that I knew that the people who actually did the work had the best ideas, because I had been one of those people who had those ideas and would offer ideas and people would just shut you down because you didn't know better, because that's not how we always do it here, son. And so I really enjoyed improving things, making it faster, cheaper, better quality, whatever it is. I really liked that. And I liked doing that through other people. And I really liked when someone would have an idea and I would say, yeah, let's try that. And it would work. And that sense of pride and meaning that they got from that because they'd made a difference. That was really cool, because factory work at its core is mind-numbingly boring.
Yes.
And so if you don't have something else that you can kind of be part of or look forward to or be working on, it's just work. And so
it's really interesting. It's what you were talking about. You did quite an arts focused degree, but actually you're talking about real business focused sort of improvements, efficiencies, productivity, and making that better. Where did those skills come from? Or were they just something that you knew you could do?
Part of it was, well, I'm convinced that the people who usually do the best job of improving a process are lazy people, because you will find a better way to do it because you hate the way you have to do it now. Yeah. But I got lucky. The company that I worked for was willing to, if you were willing to work and try, they were willing to invest in you. And so I don't know if this is something you have there, but like I have a 6 Sigma black belt. I went through that program. I went through a bunch of different other kinds of programs. I learned a little bit from them, but the main part of making something better is just taking a step back and saying, okay, what are we actually trying to do? And then what pieces of what we are doing now make it harder to achieve that? And if you pull those things out, usually you've streamlined it to a point where you will be better, faster, cheaper, all of those things. Very rarely did we have to spend a lot of money to improve something. Actually, usually spending a lot of money was almost counterproductive, because you were introducing automation into areas where automation really didn't make a difference. And and that happens all the time. Robots are great things as long as the robot actually does everything that it is supposed to do. But just having a robot sounds really fun, but it doesn't mean it's any better. So
what's your view on sort of the Tesla model, which is all robotics, making cars, versus sort of not the hand stitched, because that's the sort of top end, but sort of versus Tesla versus a Toyota or a Ford or something like that? What is the actual advantages of the human interaction with part of the manufacturing process versus the robotic side?
Well, if you think about it, a robot or anything that automates something is no different. It's just a different scale of using a tool, or a wrench or whatever else. They all end up being tools. And so if the tool makes it better, faster, cheaper, more reliable, whatever else, then that's awesome. And the people side of it is the folks involved ability to actually do something with the tool that makes it. Did I lose you?
No, I've still got you.
Shoot. Okay. Sorry. I thought you froze up. Sorry. Were you still hearing me?
Yeah, no, I can still hear you.
Oh, you're frozen again. Oh, okay. You froze. You have editing capability, correct?
Yes, I do, of course.
Okay. So let's see. So you can cut me off somewhere and I'll start.
Yeah,
This
let me ask
again.
you another question. So you
Okay.
said that you ran a plant yourself. There must have been some stories to go with running a plant full of people making things.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I kind of created plenty of stories along the way of my own before I was in charge, which made it really hard to scold people for doing things that I did. It was a different time. We would take people and we would put them inside of. We had these certain, like, they were box containers that would wrap around a stack of product, and
Yeah.
we would put people inside them. We'd run them through a shrink wrap machine and stick them on a shelf somewhere. I it's silly. But again, and I used to be, how do I say this? If people were kind of doing something a little bit goofy like that, if it wasn't unsafe and it didn't take away from what they were actually supposed to be doing, because sometimes people are just watching their machines run. And if that was okay, then I kind of would work really hard to look the other way and not notice,
Right.
because it is really dull. And if you think you can have someone stand for 8 hours and stare
Yeah.
at something while it operates,
Yeah.
it just doesn't happen.
So as you said, you went into a managerial role, and then what actually triggered your move to? When I was doing some reading on you a couple of days ago, you were saying that you thought you'd just give writing a go, and I couldn't find any more detail, and I hate trying to find it through Wikipedia, so I just thought I'd ask you.
Yeah.
So what was the what was that trigger that moved you from manufacturing into writing?
So my goal had always been, even at the very beginning, I thought someday I would like to run a plant. Part of that was ego, where I would watch people above me and think, as everyone does, I could do your job better than you can. We all think that. Sometimes you get there and you go, wow, I can't do that job better. But you always assume that you can. And so I wanted to run a plant, and I got to that point and had 1,000 people, and I was in my dream job. I had made it. And probably the biggest trigger is one day a guy walked in my office, and within a second and a half of him talking, I knew what the next 20 minutes were going to be. I knew what he was going to say. I knew what I was going to say back. I knew the empathy that I would provide. I knew that I would listen. I knew that we would talk through all this stuff. I knew everything about it. And what I really wanted to say was, you and Joe just need to get along. So go out and do your job and quit feuding with each other. But I couldn't say that because that's not how you lead people. And I realized that if that's the point that I had reached, not only was it not fun for me anymore, but also I feel sure that meant I wasn't doing, how do I say this? This will sound cheesy, but I wasn't being of service to the people that I was supposed to lead in the way that I should. So I realized that not only was the job not great for me anymore, I probably wasn't great for the job and the people. So I got lucky in that I married really well, not financially necessarily, but in terms of, well, financially too, later, but in terms of support and encouragement and understanding. And so I would say I would be having discussions with her about my job, and she would say I was whining. But I said, I think I want to do something else. And she would say, what? And I had no other what. I didn't know what that would be. And so one day I think got tired of it, and she finally said, what would you do if you weren't doing this? And I said, I think I'd like to write. I have no writing background. I have no journalism I have none of that. All I had done is write things for work, but I thought that would be fun. And so she said, okay, why don't you do that? Well, I didn't do anything about it, because you know how that goes. You have something you want to do, but you don't actually do it for a long time. So one day she came home and she said, hey, I got you your first writing job. You're writing a press release for a startup. She had met somebody who said that so she brought it home. I was like, I've never written a press release. I don't know how to do that. And this was early internet time when that stuff was harder to search and find, like thousands. And so it took me forever to write it. It's the worst paying job on an hourly basis that I've ever done. But the guy liked it. He had me do some other stuff. My wife kind of nudged me and got me on Elance, which now is called Upwork. It's a freelancer site where you can you know that. She created a profile for me there. I didn't know it. She bid on jobs. She comes over and says, "Hey, I got you another job." I'm like, please stop doing this. But at one point, we finally said, I can't replace my income right now because I was doing, I had a good job. But she said, we're in a good spot. So why don't you try this for a year? And if it doesn't work, then you can always go back and, you may not be running a plant, but someone will hire you at a decent level. And I thought that's probably true. But I kind of skipped over something. And one of the things I always tell people, to figure out whether I not only could maybe make a living at it, but also whether I could actually do it well. Like I would do writing jobs at night and on the weekends. I did that for like 6 months. I didn't quit my job. I made sure that I did an excellent job at my job, which is really important, which a lot of people forget, because that is your breadwinner. So I did really well there. And then I just decided that all my free time, instead of being free time, would be, let me figure out if I can actually get decent at doing this. Wow. And so that's everybody that you hear people say, oh, if you want to start something, you just got to take the plunge and go all in. And, I had kids and a family and I'm not going all in. And to me, if you're not willing to put that extra time and effort into figuring it out, then you're probably not willing to do it in the first place. That's kind of how I look at it. If you're not willing to sacrifice, then you're not willing to do it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I spent,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, it's a really, really important point, which I think, like my audience to sort of listen. So one of the things that I did was I've moved from a corporate role and I quit my corporate role. Actually left the job only about 6, 7, 8 weeks ago, something like that. And to do entrepreneur and podcasting and various other things on top of that. But I spent about a year, sometimes a little bit more with the pandemic, just doing my job very well, but equally doing these things in the evenings to supplement, to get myself ready for the time to actually leave. So I totally agree. That whole point of, I'll just jack it in and just you'll make it work doesn't always work, especially if you've got a family. I've got a young family as well. So it's a really important point.
Yeah, I think that's the easy way out, is the best way to put that, because what you're saying is, I hate what I currently do. I want to do something different. And so this will be my excuse to get rid of what I hate doing. But you don't know, and you can't know. Not only can you not know whether or not you can make a business out of it, because that's hard enough, but you also don't know if you're going to be good enough at it to make a business out of it. And just because that's the only thing you have going does not mean that suddenly the skill will come to you that will allow you to get there. Desperation is not always the best tool for improvement.
So how did you research to, for example, the press release or writing an article, whatever it was? How did you learn in your own time? Because you said it was early internet, so you couldn't literally just Google on.
Well, there were some press releases, but it wasn't like now where you had all the PR news wires and all that stuff where you could see 8 zillion of them. So I just found 5 or 6. And I looked at the style and realized that, okay, there's a kind of a format here. There is a press release style. And so then I didn't copy, but I definitely borrowed from the style and said, okay, if this is kind of what works, how do I tailor what this person has to make this feel that way? And it's the same with when I first started writing articles and things. I looked at things that I thought were really good, that caught my attention, that were engaging, that were informative, that taught me something, whatever it is. And I said, okay, there's kind of a style here that I don't have my own, because I'm not smart enough to have my own, but I can borrow from that and interject a little bit of myself in there. So I wasn't copying other people's ideas or anything like that, but I was at least using kind of tried and true formats to help guide what I was doing. So, and then over time, what happens is you start to develop a little bit of your own sense, like you with podcasting. In theory, I'm guessing you've probably listened to tons of podcasts. You had a list in your mind of what seemed to work, what didn't work, what you would do, what you wouldn't do. Yeah. You get started. And then over time, you kind of became yourself, but you needed to start somewhere. Yeah. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, okay, there's a pretty good wheel over here and I don't need to reinvent it.
Exactly.
Not yet. I'll reinvent it based on experience and skill and expertise that I develop, not based on just, you know what, I think I'm just going to blow this up and do something completely different than anybody has ever done before. Because in large part, that doesn't work.
Yeah.
And it's a much riskier way to go.
I would 100% agree that the whole point of so podcasting is a really good example. I've been doing it for 3 years now, and building up that knowledge and understanding, you have to go through that first stage. So one of the other things I do is I train people how to do podcasting, but I never had that. So for me, the early doors, the first 6, 7, 8 months were pretty rubbish, I must admit. Like, they weren't very good. But as you said, you mimic the people that you admire, you bring on skills, and you work out what works for you, and then you get your voice. And I think that's right. Shown in what you're trying to say as with your writing, right?
And you can only do that if you put in the time and effort, because you can't come out of the box this fully formed, whatever it is you are. Whatever you start with will never be what you are 5 years later, and that will not be what you are 20 years later. But all that evolution and that growth has to come from putting in the repetitions. Yeah. And you have to start somewhere. So again, don't reinvent a wheel. There's really great wheels out there. Yeah. Just take one, and then slowly over time, you can make it your own.
And it's really interesting. You've said a couple of times now with your career, working hard is actually because there's the whole debate of working hard and working smart, and I'm all for working smart, as you were saying in the plant. You're working smart to make things more efficient and more productive, etc. But equally, there has to be an element of being able to work hard as well. When it gets tough, you need to dig in and grit and stuff and hustle to get things right.
Yeah, there's 3 pieces to that. There's you don't really know what to do. You don't know a better way. You don't have the tools, the resources, whatever else it is, but you can work hard. You can dig a ditch with a shovel. Yeah. It takes a while, but it is strictly a matter of time and effort, and you can get there. Then there's the working smart, where you say, okay, we still have to dig this ditch, but now I have tools, or I have techniques, or I have whatever it is. And so I can get the thing done with less effort and less input and all. And then there's the third one, which every successful person that I've ever talked to, and I'm fortunate that I've gotten to talk to tons, they never look at it as smarter or harder. It's harder and smarter. Right. It's always an and. So it's like, okay, I've found all these different ways to do this even smarter. And now when I work harder, I get even more outcome because I'm leveraging both. And so the people that think you have to have one or the other, that's a really silly way to go at it. You should just say to yourself, okay, I am going to work hard, but I'm going to find the smartest ways to work hard that I can. And that will be my constant search.
Yeah. Awesome. Right. Taking a step out of your career, do you have a morning routine?
Yes. It's really, it's both boring and yucky, probably. I've been working from home for, I guess 15, 16 years now. So the pandemic thing wasn't other than the fact it killed speaking gigs, it wasn't a big deal. So what I do is my commute is 2 flights of stairs. So my morning routine starts the night before. So I will decide whatever it is the most important thing I need to do the next day. Yep. And I will prepare for that the night before. So if it's materials I need out, or if it's certain things I need on my computer, whatever it is, I'll have that kind of ready, and I know what I'm going to do. Mm-hmm. And so then I set a bottle of water and a protein bar by my computer, and I go to bed, whatever. So I get up, put on some clothes, brush my teeth, go downstairs, sit down, and I start working. So I'm working within 5 to 7 minutes of when I get up. And I know that means that I haven't taken a shower, but no one knows. So it's okay. And I work on that first thing. I may skim really quickly to see if an email came in that's urgent, truly urgent. And there is a difference between urgent and important. And if I have to deal with that, I do. But then otherwise, I knock out the first thing that I had on my list. And the reason for that is, for me at least, if I try to ease into my day, like a lot of people like to do, I kind of can't shift back into hard, let's go mode. It's hard for me to shift that gear. It's hard to flip the switch and say, okay, now's the time to start. But if I sit down and start and I accomplish what I set out to accomplish, that feels really good, which we'll probably talk about in a little bit when we talk about my book, but that feels good. That's motivating. It's kind of exciting. I'm ready to move on to what's next, because now I have positive momentum. So I didn't have to overcome any chilling, reading stuff, social media, whatever. I didn't have to flip my switch. My switch is on. And so then at some point I will, I'll take my shower and it all kind of works. But at that point, it's kind of exciting because you're going and you're doing and you're getting things done and it feels good. And so that's my morning routine. Prepare the night before, figure out what the most important thing you have to do is, or what really works for some people is to do the thing you dread the most that you have to do the next day, because if you can knock him out, then the rest of your day feels awesome. But get it ready and do it the first thing.
Yeah, it's the whole Brian Tracy, eat that frog.
Yeah, eat the frog.
Yes, brilliant. So are you an early bird?
Yes. My wife puts people to sleep for a living. She also wakes them up.
She works. Does she work for Fox?
No.
I didn't know if she.
No, she's in anesthesia. So operating rooms start early, so we get up. I'm usually up between 5 and 6, I would say. So that means I'm working between 5 and 6, which I also really like because that gets you that head start before other people can kind of interrupt or need something, or you start to get emails or phone calls or whatever else it is. I really like that time when it's just you and your thing and you can get things done. So I would say I am an early bird.
Okay, awesome. So you've had a successful career as a ghostwriter. You've written over 50 books. I think it's probably must be much.
Yeah, that's old.
Yeah, that's old data. But so you and what I found really interesting that have been a successful ghostwriter is the variety of different things that you've been involved in. Property, management, finance, all sounds like what you would expect. But then you've got breastfeeding and horticulture and things like this. So how do you build that knowledge on such a diverse subjects?
Early on, I'm fortunate as far as the ghostwriting goes that as time passed and I built up some skill and expertise and things that I could pick and choose better what I did. But early on, a job was a job. And if someone was willing to hire me, I was willing to say yes. Right. And so like the hydroponics book, which I've tried to repress the entire experience.
Hydroponics?
It's growing plants in water only.
Oh, okay.
And that's all I choose to remember about it. But there were people that said, hey, I've got some knowledge, some background, some ability to sell a book, but I need a book. And so I would figure it out. And so it was actually kind of cool because in some cases I got paid to learn about things, which was really neat. But as time went by, I got to do more management, more leadership, more business stuff, which is my wheelhouse, because that's where I grew up and that's what I know. And so when I would do that, especially for higher profile business people, it made the process really easy because in most cases, they didn't want to spend a lot of time with me. They wanted a book. They knew they could sell a book, but they wanted the process to be as easy as possible. And so we could talk for a few hours. I would get a sense of what they wanted, what we were going to do, and they would turn me loose basically to write it. And then I would come back at the end and say, hey, I need some stories, I need some anecdotes. Let's add some color to this so it feels like it's you. And that wouldn't take very long either. And so a lot of times I was writing things for other people that was actually me, or at least what was in my head and my experience. But that was okay because many business lessons and strategies and tactics and stuff, they're universal. They're not, that is another wheel that has been invented fairly well. So I got to where I was doing more management, leadership, entrepreneurship, stuff like that, because I got to where I could. But early on, I would take what someone would give me. And, because I needed to put money on the table and food on the table. And so that was okay. And so one other thing, and I promise I'll shut up about this. People often say, as a ghostwriter, don't you hate it that you don't get credit, that your name's not on the cover or stuff like that? No, because credit doesn't pay the bills. Projects pay the bills. And sometimes that I felt like having my name on the cover actually was detrimental because, sometimes you'll see a book and it'll be like, say, by Mark with so-and-so. And you automatically think, okay, Mark didn't have anything to do with it. The with person, that's the one that did all the work. And I think it takes away from the person who did it. So I just see it in ghostwriting cases as I'm a contractor and I will build the house that you asked me to build and you get to live in it. I don't get to live in it. My job is to build it and get paid and move on. So that actually worked really well that approach because I didn't see writing as expressing my individuality or expressing my personality or somehow expressing some artistic thing. My job was to give you what it was that you wanted and that would best serve the project. And that's helped me in everything I write for myself as well, because it isn't about me. It's about what does the reader get and how does the reader benefit from that? So that actually was good experience.
It's so interesting, the whole vanity metrics that people have got now with social media, and you need so many likes or whatever it is to be successful. And actually, as you said, like these sorts of metrics don't like in social media, it doesn't bring you money in. It just means you've got a lot of people that might like it. It's a really interesting that it sounds like throughout your career, your sort of ego, you said you had an ego to run a plant, but you were very much your sort of vanity metrics is very low. It's not all about you, Jeff.
Well, I think yeah, and that's probably a product of upbringing, because my dad thought you should be a good loser and an even better winner. And then that's cool. But I just none of that stuff actually has a tangible outcome. I have, I don't know, 1 million and some followers on LinkedIn. I am no different today than I was before I had 1 million and some followers on LinkedIn. There is no tangible benefit to that. Not really. People will say, yeah, but they'll give you reasons why that's helpful. And maybe it is a little bit, but in the end, what matters is if you have clients that you do a good job for them and they're happy with you and they will come back. Or if you're writing a book that, people will actually gain value from it and feel like, wow, I'm glad I did that. That's what matters, not the vanity side of it. So, I do have an ego, and I think everybody does, but I like to think I'm smart enough not to confuse it for a tangible outcome, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's go on to Ink, where you're a contributing editor. You're prolific, I would say. You said about LinkedIn. So I see your articles on LinkedIn
all the time,
multiple times a day.
Sickeningly.
No, I love it. This is one of the reasons I wanted you on my podcast, because I love what you write, and you have such interesting guests as well that on your articles. First of all, before we get into the guests, and we'll delve into that a little bit, how did you get the gig?
So this is another thing of my wife's. One of the problems with ghostwriting is it's a little bit like Fight Club. First rule of Fight Club is you can't talk about Fight Club. And the first rule of ghostwriting is you can't talk about the people that you've ghostwritten for. And it makes it really hard to market yourself.
Right.
Because if some, and I couldn't even share things that I'd written. So if you had come to me and said, hey, can I see if you examples of what you've written? I go, oh, I can't really do that. Well, who have you written for? I can't really help that, but I promise I'll do well. So promise I will do a good job for you only goes so far. So she said, hey, you need some stuff in your own name. And I thought, nobody wants to read anything by me, because who am I? And so, but I figured she was right. And so I pitched, I don't know, probably 10 of the major business sites. And to make a long story short, one of them responded, and I said, I don't want any money. Let me just see if I can do this. Within a couple of months, I had done really well in terms of views and readership, and came back and said, hey, they were trying to lock me up basically, but they pretended that it was just flattery. And they said, we'd like to pay you for this. And they said, yeah, we can either pay you by the article or you can get paid by page views. And I thought, well, okay, I'm doing okay. I don't need this. I like more money, but I don't need it. So why not bet on myself? Because if you get paid by the article, you're capped. But if you're paid by page views, if you do really well, you have a chance to do really well. And so I think I was one of the few people that actually chose the page view side. And it worked out spectacularly well, because it turned out that I could figure out how to write things that people liked and shared and, got value from, and was able to build an audience. So but the ink thing, again, it comes from my wife saying very, very sagely, you need something in your own name. And it worked out really well, because not only did I and do I get paid, but in a small way advertises the fact that I am a ghostwriter, and it lands me clients that way too. Right. And it helped until the speaking world changed. It helped with speaking, and it was a really great flywheel for lots of stuff. And the reason that Random House signed me to do a book was because they knew I had an audience and that they knew I could sell books. And so all of those things fed. So everything good in my life comes from my wife. That's the moral of the story. And I mean that sincerely. That's not a joke.
Um, so um, so as the Ink magazine developed, you started writing things about management and business and finance. You said that's very much your sort of
Yep.
your pinch point, where you get the most value from. But you've interviewed some really amazing guests as well. Like when I was looking through the list, it's just the phenomenal list of business influencers. What's it like meeting these guys that are billionaires, are influencers, thought leaders? Are they intimidating to interview, or are they just another human being?
All right, I'm going to answer that in a second. But the question related to that I always get is, how did you manage to connect with these people? Because everybody wants to do something similar. So I'm going to answer that first, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I looked at trying to build an audience, and I thought, sometimes big names, people respond well to that, and they might want to read that. And so I cast around and tried to land some big names. Nobody wanted to talk to me because who was I? So I thought, okay, as with everything I've ever done, I got to start at the bottom. So I thought, okay, I can't get Richard Branson, although I did eventually, but I can get this guy that just started a cat litter company. So I'll talk to him. And so I would talk to him, and my goal was to do the best I could with that and to tease some things out of it that maybe people would say, wow, that's not usually what I read, or that's not usually what I see, or I actually got a lot from that, the actionable tips, advice, strategies, all that kind of stuff. I thought, I'm going to do the best I can with that. And if I do a few of those, then if I go a little bit farther up the ladder of notoriety, I can send that to them and say, hey, and this is the kind of work I do. And so I basically just worked my way up that way until I got to the point where I could get in front of really big people, because they could look and say, oh, okay, well, he's talked to that person. That's pretty cool. That's credibility. And then if they did look at stuff I had written, they would go, you know what, this probably is worth my time, because I get to talk about things maybe I don't get to talk about, or it's more in depth, or whatever it is. So that's that. As for talking to them, the main takeaway from that is that every hugely successful person I've talked to, whether it's business people or athletes or entertainers or musicians or whatever they are just like me and you. They have just worked really, really hard to get really, really good at one specific thing. Otherwise, they are, what is the word? Everybody's broken. You just don't know what their break is, or something like that. But they're all different, and they're all kind of odd. And I talked to Richard Branson, sat with him for like half hour, and I think he made eye contact twice. He was always looking just off my right ear. And I thought, what's up with that? That's kind of weird, but that's okay, because he was very engaging and open, and it was a great conversation. But I just thought, that's kind of strange, and I've talked to other people that they have their quirks and they have their foibles, and it just makes them human. It doesn't make them bad people, and it doesn't make them odd. It just makes them human. So the lesson is that really successful people don't have anything that you and I or anyone else doesn't have. They just found something that they wanted to excel at, and they put in the time and effort to excel at it. And I've not spoken to a single person who is hugely successful that did not put in that time and effort. That whole idea of overnight successes and luck your way into it and all of that other, you were born that way, that's a bunch of BS. Maybe there are people out there like that, but I have not run into them.
It's like sports. So we talked about, you had mentioned about football, and sadly I'm probably the only person in England who doesn't have a team of sport football. But sports, for example, is a very good example of which is tangible, that a lot of people can relate to. If it's football or soccer or American football or whatever it is, these guys practice a lot and they get better over a period of time. It's like the story that I always think of David Beckham. So David Beckham transcends US and UK.
I've spoken to him.
Have you? All right, okay. He used to, after every training session, he would then take free kicks and spend an hour after training doing free kicks. And that is littered throughout the different types of business entertainment. You hone your skills to get better at them, and you practice and you practice and you practice.
There's no denying that there are genetic advantages and physical advantages, especially in sports, that some people have. Kobe Bryant is probably our best, or one of a great example from over here.
Yeah.
Kobe, clearly physically gifted.
Yeah.
But he was legendary for the working outside of it that he did. He would practice, but then he did his own practices and they did his own weight sessions. And he was relentless with that. And so the difference between, an athletic person who reaches a certain level of success and the people who are hugely successful, it's the work part. Or every once in a while, somebody may make it to the top that way, but they don't stay. Because the effort is also what keeps you there. Exactly.
And this is the thing that sometimes the people that are less gifted at a younger age can be better the long term because they've had to work hard at it. Some of the people that are naturally gifted, it becomes so easy, they don't try hard enough.
And the other thing about that is that the people that are less gifted, one of the things they have done is learned how to learn, which is what the gifted people never had to do. And so that helps with longevity too, because if you've overcome obstacles, if you've figured out what works for you, if you've done all those things through repetition and hard work, you also know how to learn. And the cool thing is, if we applied this more broadly to professions in general, you take those lessons with you into whatever you do after that. So there are things that you learned before you started your own business that you bring with you. And there are things you will learn from this that you will probably bring to some other venture at some other time. And so hard work and the lessons you learned from all that stuff, you take with you forever. It's never done and gone. And that's probably why some of the athletes that had to work hard throughout their career end up being fairly successful at something else afterwards. Because they know a process, they know how to apply process to a goal.
So have you, or do you have a coach or mentor at the moment?
No.
And is something like a coach something because you were saying you with your writing, you based it, or not based it, but you started with other people's and everything. But did you ever think to yourself, oh, actually, I could really, I don't know, with the book, your own book, it would really help if I got a coach to help me on this angle or that angle?
Well, that was one of the reasons that because I had self-published a collection of columns before I wrote my proper book. And it sold really well. But one of the reasons that I decided to go with a publisher as opposed to self-publishing again, is I thought, it probably would be good for me to actually have an editor who pushed me to be better. Because I think I'm good, but I know it could be better. Everybody can be better. And so that was one of the reasons I did it, was to find out, okay, I'll get a proper professional editor with experience who will push me to make this even better. That happened to a degree, but not as much as I kind of hoped. I think she thought I knew what I was doing and she would always defer to me. I was like, wait a minute, I'm just saying, this is what I think. What do you think? She said, oh, you know best. I'm like, oh, come on. So anyway, but it was still a good experience and I'm not trying to criticize it. Where I like coaches is in things that are other than like this part of my career. Like if I did decide to do a podcast, then I would hire you and say, all right, help me to be good at this so that I can work smarter and harder at what I'm doing. Like physical stuff, like when I got into cycling, I was lucky enough that I knew a professional cyclist and I said, dude, I want to be able to ride this certain event. What should I do? And he laid out a hateful program for me to follow. But that was okay because that was what I needed. And so in things like that, I really like turning to people who have done it, know how to do it, are successful at it, and can give you the real world. This is what you should do. It's not going to be fun. It's not always going to be what you would like to do, but if you put in the time and effort, you will succeed. And I think that's the key to anything like that. I know lots of people that say, I don't know, let's make this up, I want to run a marathon. And so they decide, because they're unique and they're individuals and they're special and we're all bespoke, that they need their own special little training plan that's just them and it caters to their needs. And so they'll create something and it doesn't work because, usually what you would like to do is not what you need to do in order to do something that's difficult. And so I would much rather say, if I'm going to spend 6 months training for this, then I want as close to a guarantee as I can get that effort is going to pay off. And so you get that from someone who has been there and done that and is willing to tell you the unvarnished truth, as opposed to what you want to hear, or because they, sometimes you engage people to coach you. And if you're paying them, they tell you what you want to hear because that way you'll stick with them. There is a reason for that too. So it's not as outcome based as it should be. So anyway, I really like coaches for things where I want to learn to do something that I haven't done. And I know it's going to require a lot of effort, and I don't want to waste the effort if I can possibly do it.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely. So let's go on to your book, Motivational Myth. So I think it's a great book. As I said, I read it a couple of years ago, and that whole idea of iterative processes and small successes equal motivation was so powerful. It was bringing in lots of things, other things that I was reading at the same time. So I don't know if you said you're into cycling. So Dave Brailsford from the British Cycling, and he talked about iterative gains and every 1%. Day 1% every 1%. Day. And I even taught that to my, because I coach people as well, and talk about just getting better every day by 1%. And you're surprised
the accumulation of aggregate gains or something like that.
Absolutely. And so it was really supportive of the other things that I was reading. How did you get to your end game first, or how it was to get motivation first of all, and then did you work backwards and bust the myths that way? How did you sort of formulate your writing?
What really happened is that I had gone through a string of where I was talking to really successful people. And one day I was talking to Venus Williams, and I said, you've been doing this your whole life. It must've been your passion, your dream, whatever. And she said, not really. It was kind of my dad's, first of all. But then, I just thought, this is fun. I like tennis. I think I'd like to get better. And so that was her starting motivation, and it kind of stayed with her. And I thought about all the other people I talked to, and none of them had this lightning bolt moment where they're like, oh my gosh, I want to be, the best podcaster in the world. And that's my passion. And I've got all the motivation I need to carry me through all the years of time and effort and work it's going to take to get me there. They all just found something they were interested in and thought, you know what, I would like to get better at this. And so then I compared that to the people that would write me and say, I really want to do X, but I don't have the motivation. Where am I going to get the motivation? So I had the people on the one side who were struggling, who were looking for motivation so that they would be able to be successful. And then I had the people that were successful saying, really the little successes are what gave me the motivation to do this. And so that's kind of where the idea of motivation doesn't come first. Really, it's a little bit of effort and a little bit of success, and the feeling of improvement and of succeeding at something gives you the motivation to keep going and keep trying. And so it's back to those iterative gains. If you can always be making little teeny improvements, if you can periodically see that, what I'm doing is actually working, that's motivating. That feels good. That's what keeps you going. Not that, I have to find my passion. And I've even done things where I wasn't really even interested in doing it at first, but the process of doing it and getting a little better at it made me feel good about myself. And it's always fun to be good at stuff. We always like doing things we're good at. And someday down the road, I thought, I really like this, but I would never have picked it as something I liked, but I kind of had to get good at it. And again, if you can get good at something, you invariably will like it.
One of the great things I thought about when reading was the willpower section, where you were saying that you can almost have decision fatigue, where if you give too many options. And it's a story that I don't know where it came from, but about jams, where people were checking different types of jams, marmalades, and they gave an option of 6 options to the general public, and they said, we like 1, 2, and 3. If you gave them 30 options, they couldn't give you an answer what their favorite was.
They couldn't choose.
It's really because you've got that story, and then you've got the Steve Jobs with the clothes that he wore. It was like, I just don't want to think about this stuff.
Right.
I just do the same thing every day. to get. And I think that's really interesting. As a willpower, you've got so many things that you need to think about and prioritize. And we've talked about these different businesses, different writing things, ghostwriting, all these different things that you're involved in. And sometimes you can get fatigued by the most like what to have for lunch. It's like you don't need to think so much about those sorts of things.
Well, it's also true that if you're trying to do something, and the classic example is, say, losing weight. So if you're trying to lose weight and every day you have to decide what you're going to have for lunch. So you're going to sit there and say, okay, do I want this? Do I want this? Do I want this? Now you have to make decisions. Now you have to exercise some amount of willpower to make the right decision for what you're trying to achieve. Yeah. But if you've sat there and said, you know what, for lunch every day, I'm basically going to have, half a chicken breast and some salad and an apple, or I don't know what it is. Mm-hmm. If that's your lunch, while that may seem boring to you, that supports the goal that you are trying to achieve, and you don't even have to think about it. So I know people that want to exercise first things. So when they go to bed, they lay out their workout clothes by the bed. Yep. So that when they put their feet down, they have to actively choose not to put on their workout clothes. Yep. And the path of least resistance is usually the one that we'll take. And so they go ahead and put their clothes on, they go on. And there's all kinds of things with choice architecture like that. If you want to stop drinking less soda, you put 3 bottles of water on your desk and you always make sure they're there. So if you're thirsty, the thing you reach for is the water, and it's automatic. And so there are small decisions you can make and there are big decisions you can make, but whenever willpower would be involved, then the key is to try to make it automatic so you don't have to exercise the willpower. And that way, when you do need it, you've still got some.
Yeah. And what's your idea on goals? What's your thoughts on goal setting? Is it something you do?
I do, but I think the importance of a goal is not that you can write it on a wall and say, okay, I'm going to run a marathon in, September. That sounds really good, but the distance between here and that marathon is really far. Yeah. And I don't think it's inspirational. So I think the goal, if your goal is to run a marathon in September, that goal, the importance of it is that it informs the process that you create to achieve that goal. So you say, okay, I want to do that. Then what do I need to do? And let's break all that down. Let's create a calendar or a schedule or whatever it may be. Let's set my routine. And then I will forget my goal. And each day I'm just going to focus on what's on my list today that I need to do to get me there. Because if you do that, then you get to feel good. If today was run a mile and you ran a mile, you get to feel good because you did what you set out to do. That always feels good. But if you run that mile and then you look on the wall and say, oh my gosh, I've got to run 26 someday. Well, that's like hot death. Yeah. And that's actually demotivating because it's like, how will I ever get there from where I am? So goals inform processes. Processes help you create routines and things. And then you just keep your head down and you do the work and you get to feel good every day that you do what it is you said you set out to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you became a keynote speaker and you've had a successful career in that. I would imagine, obviously, pandemic has totally dried up any sort of speaking.
Yeah, pretty much.
On traveling, at least.
Yes.
Is the ambition, has your passion for keynote speaking sort of changed with the pandemic? Are you now thinking, maybe I don't want to travel as much? You said you also had 15 years of working from home. So, but what's your sort of view 2021? Will you kick off again if it works out that way?
I would, the travel part doesn't bother me at all. I can find ways to do that part. I've had a lot of opportunities to do some virtual keynote type things, and I've done a few. Don't love them, to be honest with you. I get a lot of, I think I'm a better speaker in person when I can see people and engage with people and adjust to the room and read the room and create, because I clearly am not a professional voice presenter. No one is going to hire me to read the news. But I can establish rapport and engage with people and stuff like that. And so I really like that. So if it changes and it opens up, because I actually think that's really fun. I enjoy doing it. It makes me nervous. And every time about 10 minutes before I go on, I think, why did I agree to do this? This is so stupid. I wish I was home. I don't want to do it. And then, 5 minutes into it, it's like, God, this is awesome. This is the greatest thing in the world. I want to do 50 more. But you know how that goes. Whenever something, I think that's a good sign that you like something when it scares you right beforehand. That's
I'm
actually fun.
Big on talking outside your comfort zone to
Yeah.
be successful, because to really have growth, the only way you do that is being outside your comfort zone.
Yep. But I do. It is funny. My wife will tease me, and like the day before, like last year, I had a bunch, and I was going to do one somewhere. I think I had it was like 6,500 people or something. And I was getting ready to leave. And my wife said, "Oh, so you're going to go do that one?" I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Are you glad you said yes?" And I said, "No, no, I don't want to go." So, but then it turned out really well. But yeah, you're right. The comfort zone thing is, but it's hard. It's taxing to always be pushing yourself into a place where you're not necessarily comfortable.
Yeah.
But comfort does, there's a balance there, because as you get better at something, you have that confidence that comes from success, which is the only kind of confidence that really matters as far as I'm concerned. You've got that fake, rah, look in the mirror and say, I am somebody kind of confidence, but the success is actually what gives you confidence. And so then you're left with a little bit of discomfort, where maybe you're going to try something a little bit new with it, or you're going to branch out just a bit. And that's a whole lot better than, oh my gosh, I'm going to go from a corporate gig to, a business coach or something like that. That's a big comfort zone switcher.
It is. I can't deny that. I find it equally exciting as nerve-wracking as well, to be honest. Loving the flexibility, loving the availability to be able to spend a bit more time with my kids and not be traveling into London every day. And so for me, I wouldn't say wholly, but it's partly a lifestyle choice. Obviously the money has to come with very much like what you were saying about your writing. I've agreed with my wife that we would give it a year, see how it goes. If it doesn't work out, if the money doesn't come in as much as I'm hoping and sort of to an extent expecting, then I can get another job. I can do something different. It's all possible.
And you will have gained some skills and experiences and connections and all sorts of stuff that you will carry with you for the rest of the time, whatever it is you choose to do. And I think people forget that part. They forget that even if it doesn't work out, there are things that you take with you that you would not have had.
Yeah, absolutely. So just on, you were saying about speaking to the number of people you've spoken to is just incredible. If there was one or two people that changed your life, is such an extreme way of saying, but one or two people that you spoke to, you might have spent half an hour with them, and then you wrote an article about them. What were name just one or two of the people that sort of shifted your mindset or shifted the way that you approach things going forward? Who were they?
All right, I'm just going to, off the top of my head, pick two.
Sure.
One of them, a lot of your audience has probably never heard of. His name is Joey Logano. He's a NASCAR driver. That's our stock car racing series, and he's a champion. He's won the series before. We were talking about pressure, and he had this line that I've always loved, and he says, "Pressure is a privilege. Pressure is not, something that's like, oh my gosh, I've got all this pressure, I got whatever." He says, you feel pressure, that means you are in a position to do something that hopefully is extraordinary or wonderful or life-changing, or just, it's a big thing. So if you feel pressure, feel privileged, because that means you're in a position to do something cool. Yeah. And I thought,
that is so true.
That is a really good way of looking at that. And in fact, if you don't feel pressure now and then we're back to what you said. You're not pushing yourself. You're not in a discomfort zone. You're just kind of coasting. So I really like that one, and I've carried it with me. And then the other one, I did a TED Talk a few years ago, and I was talking to Duff McKagan, who's the bass player for Guns N' Roses.
Yeah.
Really cool guy.
Yeah.
And I told him I was doing that, and he's like, "Oh, that's really awesome." And so we spent 20 minutes of the time I had with him talking about that, which I thought, dude, I didn't call you to talk about me. But I said, I'm kind of nervous, and I'm whatever. And he said, he still gets nervous. He still gets afraid. You wouldn't think so. And I'm sorry, I'm struggling with this, but he said what he always tells himself and what he tells his daughters is, whenever you're about to do something, no matter what it is, if you're scared, just say to yourself, head up, chest out, in their case, I'm a McKagan, and go out and kick ass.
Right.
And then the cool part about it was, and I said, well, that sounds really good if it's you, but I'm me. And he said, but what you have to remember is that the audience wants you to kick ass.
Yeah.
Like, they are not there to critique you. They are not there to find fault. They are not hoping for you to do poorly, which, in my mind, I'm just thinking about all the negative outcomes. He said, they want you to kick ass. So they are on your side. So walk out there and do your thing, because they want you to succeed. And I thought that was a really good way to look at lots of stuff. So if you're a salesperson, you're going in to talk to a client, they want you to have an awesome product or service, because that will help them.
Yeah.
If you're, whatever it is, if you're going into a meeting and you're nervous about it and you've got a proposal you're going to put out, the people there want it to be awesome, because hopefully that will help them with whatever it is they are trying to do. So people actually do want you to succeed. It's really hard to remember that, because you're thinking about all the negatives that could come from it, where you might get embarrassed, or you might do poorly, you fall on your face, they say no, whatever it might be. But they want you to do well. And if you twist it around and think about it that way, it is kind of empowering, and it does make you feel a little better. Still doesn't mean I wasn't really nervous when I walked out. And he actually texted me like 20 minutes before, and he said, it shocked me. And he said, I know you're going on soon. Head up, chest out.
No.
Wow. And he said, they want you to kick ass. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. Duff McKagan's texting me. So I wanted to go out on stage and say, by the way, I just got a text from Duff McKagan. Anyway, so that's two. That's
perfect. Absolutely perfect. So writing about business, finance, personal development, has business opportunities come across your way? Have you wanted to run your own business? You've obviously got a massively full agenda, but going through and speaking to all these inspirational people in business, have you ever thought, oh, I'd really like to own this, run this, be this in business?
Well, I have the business of me, which I am definitely the worst boss I have ever had, because I have really expectations. But because I worked for a Fortune 500 company for so long and ran things, and I kind of scratched that itch of what it's like to be in charge and call the shots and make the decisions and things like that. And so, and probably at this point, I would not be as good I can give plenty of leadership advice. I don't know that I would be the best leader at this point. I think I could do really well. I don't know. That's the answer to that. And so it would make me a little bit nervous about that. I guess I know enough about leadership now to know that there are a zillion ways you can screw it up. And it makes me a little nervous that way. But going back to what you said, where what you do now is partly a lifestyle choice, the best thing about this, and it took me a long time to work to this level, is that I kind of get to choose a lot of the things that I do. And I get to, you can say you set your own schedule. And to most people who have a 9-to-5 job, that sounds like, oh, you get to decide you only work 3 hours a day. That's not what that is. It just means that you can decide, okay, I'm going to go for a ride for 2 hours this morning, but I'll have to work longer tonight.
Yeah.
That's kind of what that means. But I like the fact that I've been able to use this to blend my professional life with things I'm interested in personally. So I get to talk to people that I've always wanted to talk to. I get to go to, or at least when events still happened, I got to go to events and see behind the scenes of things like Formula One or other sports or businesses or plants that I've wanted to go to, or, it's afforded me the opportunity to blend and have a work-life balance where my personal interests actually are part of my professional life. If I do fitness related things, I can write about them. It's all part of a package that kind of works now. So I've managed to be able to pull that off. And so that would be another reason not to. And so to put a bow on that, I say that to people sometimes and they will say, well, you're lucky, but I work for somebody else. And so I just have to do what I'm told to do. So I can't really blend my personal with my work. And I would say, well, yeah, you can. Because if you, for instance, get a lot of satisfaction from helping people, there are zillions of ways to do that at every job.
Yeah.
And so express that. Or if you like to come up with new ideas and try to follow them through. I've yet to run into business people who will not let you follow through on a cool idea,
Yeah.
especially if you're willing to put in some extra time to prove that it makes sense.
Yeah.
They may not say, yeah, we'll give you 2 weeks to just go off and try that.
Yeah.
But if you come to them and say, I've been working on this in the night and a couple of weekends, and I think this is really cool and we could do something, most people will do that. So there is a way, no matter what your job is, to find aspects that are personally meaningful to you that you can explore through that job, and it'll make you feel better about the job that you have.
So what we call over here sweat equity. So you're
Yep.
you're putting in the effort to get the reward. Okay. Is there another book in the pipeline?
Yes, I need to write another book. My publisher would like me to write another book.
Okay.
I have not quite figured out what it would be. A couple times I thought I sort of had it, and then I thought, wait a minute, is that a book?
Okay.
And so yes, there is, but I haven't quite figured it out yet.
Okay, awesome. Well,
Sorry.
Can't wait. I can't wait for it to come out. Okay, we're coming to the end of the podcast. I ask the same 6 questions to everyone that comes onto my podcast. They're quick fire questions. They don't need a quick fire answer. What's the best decision that you made?
So again?
Best decision that you made?
Oh, wow. Summing up the courage to ask my wife to marry me. Gosh.
Awesome. What's the best piece of advice you've been given?
My grandfather was basically I don't know if you have the same phrase for it. It's basically like a tenant farmer, where he had a house on a farm that someone else owned, and he worked the farm. And so, his job, if he lost his job, not only did he lose his job, but he lost his house and he lost his car and he lost everything. So it's a perilous existence. And he and I was helping him one summer shovel out horse stalls, and they had been unshoveled for some period of time. So the fragrance was there. And so we're cruising along, and I finally said, oh God, this smells. And he said, that smell? That's the smell of job security. And the point was that if you are willing to do what other people are not, that there is a place for you, and that you can actually succeed just by looking for what can I do that somebody else won't? What can I do that somebody else can't? You can stand out by doing what other people will not do. Yeah. So I've never forgotten that one. The smell of job security.
I might know the answer to this. Who's helped you most in your career?
All right, I've got 2 answers. Obviously, my wife, for what we've talked about before. When I was working for a Fortune 500 company, I was offered a job running an experimental division of our plant. And I thought, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. That'll take me out of the ladder that I think I'm climbing. And the gentleman that had offered it to me said, you can always go back to that, but you can never replace what you will learn over here, because you'll never know what you missed. And I thought, okay, that does make sense. And then he turned out to be a great, I don't know if mentor is the right word, because he was my boss, but I learned more from him in 2 years than I had learned from anybody else. And I still quote things that he says, and they're not just like aphorisms. They're like technical things. And so he would be, his name was Ron Garrison, and he would be another one. And I tried to use him as my example when I had people that worked for me of, okay, if I lead not just through objectives, which is actually easy to do, but if I lead through how can I help people improve in their careers and lives and whatever, if I could do that, then I've accomplished both. Because if you make people better, they will do better for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any regrets?
Oh gosh. Yes, but the funny thing about regrets, and I don't know that I can pick out one specific that's really fun. All right, I'll give you the fun one. But my general thing on regrets is that I've almost never regretted things that I've done. It's always the things that I didn't do. Because if you do something, you can usually, if nothing else, you learn something from it. But if you didn't do it, you got nothing from it other than the looking back and going, I wonder what would have happened. So, but one regret that comes to mind, it's actually kind of funny. That was back when I was working, and I was going to be interviewed for a supervisor job in another department. And I was already a supervisor, so I didn't know why I was doing it in the first place. And then I was being interviewed by employees of the department, which I thought was odd, because should they be, the questions they're going to ask are not the questions that really matter.
Yeah.
So I had a long day and I'd been really, really busy. And so I took my lunch to the interview and I ate my lunch during the interview. So I apologized and I said, hey, I was busy and I'm sorry, but I'm really hungry and I hope you don't mind. And I thought that's probably as disrespectful a thing as I could have done. At the time, it didn't really bother me because I was kind of that way. But looking back, that was not my finest hour.
What are you most proud of?
Oh, wow. All right. Obviously, kids and spouse and all that kind of stuff. But if we put that aside and we think if we approach this business wise, I think what I feel best about are the times when I would promote someone that no one else thought should be promoted and they didn't see it and they thought it was a dumb decision. But I felt strongly that given the chance and the opportunity, this person could do really well, and it turned out well. And they went on to bigger and better things. And I don't know that they would have gotten the chance had I not done it, because of the way they were perceived. And so things like that, or when you put somebody in a position to do something different or special or a project or whatever, and you give them that opportunity to show what you think they have, and maybe they don't even know that they have it in them. And then it turns out really well, and that helps them grow and develop. So, numbers and results and things like that, they come and go and they're kind of gone. But if you've made a decent impact on even just a few people in some small way, then that's a really cool thing. And that is, when you get right down to it, that is your job. If you're in a leadership position, that is your job.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Thank you. What does legacy mean to you?
Well, first of all, I do not think I am in any way close to important enough to be talking about a legacy. I'm not Tony Blair or Margaret Thatcher or anyone like that, whether the legacy is positive or negative. So I guess I guess it's my last answer. It would be, if there is a legacy, it would be that maybe there are people somewhere that you did something good for, or that you helped out, or you made a little difference in their lives. That's probably as close as you're going to come. Awesome.
And where can people find you if they want to reach out to you?
As you mentioned before, I write a ton of stuff for Inc. magazine. It's inc.com. I'm on LinkedIn again, and I actually do engage with people. Not always, but I try. And so if you send me a note, I usually will respond, especially if you just say, hey, can you help me promote my book? Okay, I get 50 of those a day. Yeah. But if you have a question or if I can help in some way, then I try to. But that's the easy way. I'm not very social media. I'm not on social media much. I don't have Facebook. I use Twitter solely for my Inc. stuff. But LinkedIn, I engage with people and actually like it. And that's how you and I met.
Yeah.
So there you go.
So
it proves that I do respond.
It does. All right, Jeff, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And if I ever do decide to do a podcast, you are going to be my guy, because you're great.
Let me know. I'd happily do it for you. Thanks, Jeff. Cheers.